Chris, Revenge Performance again. We are getting a little revenge on the cylinder head today. We had to repair this mount hole here. Somebody had hacked this off so that you could probably install a header kit a little bit easier. Some of the aftermarket header kits kind of get up in this area. That's actually why we made this a little lower too. So we had some more clearance there, but I don't like picking up the engine by just one bolt. And so we welded this boss back in. It's not my proudest work here, but it'll do the job. We tied into this factory casting piece here so that has some strength. And it's really a safety issue. I've picked up these engines plenty of times by like one bolt here and so too, but it always made me a little nervous having one M8 bolt holding up your entire engine side there, particularly if you like to pull the engine with the transmission at the same time. It's a lot of weight. And besides just the property damage, I definitely don't want an engine falling on somebody and hurting them. And so that's why I put this in here, just for some peace of mind. But what that kind of snowballed into, obviously, we got a bunch of aluminum shavings in this head, and that's definitely death for an engine, any kind of shavings of metal or really anything. So we ran this through our aqueous parts washer tank, and that makes me a little nervous because even though we cleaned it up with solvent after that, that's not aqueous, it will get water down in the valve guides. And so I've had a couple of heads that we put away for storage after we cleaned like that for a while, and they sat for like a year, and some of the valves are a little sticky. And so you don't want that. You can bend some parts, you can tear your valve guides up. So it's a good idea if you're really going to get these wet to take the valves out, at least to lubricate the stems and to get them cleaned up. And so that sort of goes into, well, hey, we might as well replace the valve stem seals. One thing I really encourage if you're working on these cars, transmission, engine, turbochargers, whatever, you really should know what you got. And so if you install a part that came from somebody else and it's supposed to be low miles or anything, or if it's a part that has been with your car forever, go ahead and replace the parts that are cheap because you don't want to get stranded along the road. We don't want oil consumption on this head, particularly because oil lowers octane a lot. And so you're going to have some detonation issues if you get a lot of oil control issues, and it can foul out spark plugs and just some day-to-day type of problems. So today we're going to show you how to put one valve stem seal into this engine. Obviously the process is the same for the other 11, so we just want to do one and show you how that works. This head is off the car. We are using Felpro SS71179. That's a very high quality valve stem seal kit. We've used these for years. As far as I can tell, they're the original manufacturer for the OEM parts as well. At least nowadays they're kind of coming out of the same factory. I don't have any proof of that, of course, but that seems to be the case. They also have these brown seals for the exhaust side. You can pay attention here. You have separate exhaust and intakes. If you get a seal kit where they're not in separate bags like this, it might not be Viton on your exhaust seals, which won't hold up to the heat as well, especially in a turbo car. Now, some seal kits, both of them might be Viton, so that's not like a blanket statement, but you're kind of going to notice the non-Viton seals are often green, the rubber, and the Viton seals are brown. And so that means it has a higher resistance and it's made out of a better material that's going to last longer for you. The original ones, I don't believe are Viton, but their OEM replacement ones are Viton now, so they've made an update as well. 6G72 is really prone for valve stem seal leakage, and so it's good to use the best parts that you can as far as that goes. We have the head off the car, like I mentioned earlier. You can do this in the car, provided you take the camshafts out and all your timing components. I've probably done it more in the car than out, but when you got the head on the bench here, it is a little bit easier. Just because you're not leaning over the car and using pry tools and things of that nature to get to all these different things. A lot of these, particularly in the rear head, they're kind of angled right up against the firewall, and it's kind of hard to get to on some of these. So basically today, we just have a typical valve stem seal compressor. Has lever action here. Highly recommend that. You can do this with a C-clamp with a socket cut out of it, and I've done it plenty of times. But the nice thing about these is they have a very, very large window to get your fingers in there for valve keepers. And this is all rounded over. And so if you use a socket, a lot of times you're going to have some sharp edges on here, and that could scar up your valve retainer hats here, particularly if you're like these, and these are actually titanium. I don't want to scratch them up. My biggest doctrine of working on cars is kind of like the oaths the doctor takes, that you do no harm, basically. And so I'm trying not to make anything worse. Even if it's cosmetic, we're trying not to make it worse than it was. So this will protect this valve. We actually already did this one just to make sure we had all the tools set out and it wasn't going to be running around for tools for you guys. And we didn't scratch the keeper up or the retainer here at all. So what holds these valves in, if you can kind of look real close here, are these keepers. And so these are, it's like a collet with a wedge and a lock. And both of these kind of get underneath the valve stem and squeeze it so that you don't have your pieces flying out. And that's basically what would happen. So it's critical that you're careful with these components and that you get them out in a smooth way and you don't lose these little keepers. I've lost one in an oil pan like just about everybody and fished it out with a magnet, but it's not something you want to try to do. One other reason we're actually taking this head apart is I need to look to see which one it is. Here we go. This one here, you're going to notice it only has one keeper. And so my very, very, very sharp-eyed brother Nick was walking by the engine the other day and noticed I only had one keeper on it. And so we did get these heads secondhand, and it's not, the seller's responsibility always to make sure that you have components that are going to work for you, because I'm sure that was easy to miss. But luckily we saw that. Nick saw that because this would come apart, particularly, and you might hear a noise right away or it might wait, but I would think that this retainer is coming out with just one keeper on it. And that's going to cause this valve to drop, hit your pistons. We would have had a whole big mess again this year with the engine. And so it's really good not only to replace these valve stem seals, but you get a really close inspection of these components to make sure nothing's worn out. As these things get older and they change hands more often, you're going to find more and more stuff like this that you want to avoid. So I'm actually going to do this one because I need to hunt down another keeper here. I think I got some in the bag. So to put these back together, we'll need both. And so I'm going to go ahead and show you the whole process of taking them apart, put them together. So basically, what you got is this assembly here, lever action here. This goes on the valve side, so like that. And on the back, I think Hunter's going to come around here to the back for a second. You can see this actually shows on your valve face. It's very important if you're using any tool like this, or a C-clamp particularly, because they don't go out as far, to make sure that you don't catch the combustion chamber surface. Like if you're not careful, you could scar that up pretty bad. And it's also good to try to keep this as centered on the valve as you can, because that is just going to make it less prone to trying to bend the valve or scratch the valve face, neither of which we want. So you basically, once you kind of get this in place, you just slowly tighten this up. And we'll go around to the other side again here, Hunter. You can see here we have these big windows, and that's so that we can get a magnet in there to get these keepers out. If you have a set of heads or an original engine that have been running a long time, you're going to find that even when you start compressing on this, it doesn't really want to move, particularly if you're doing this in car, because you can put pressure from a leak down tool through your spark plug hole while this is on a car, and you can actually keep the valve from falling in the engine. And the only problem is that's not a super strong force, and so if you start pushing down on this and there's a little varnish in here, it may just open the valve, and so that's going to prevent you from taking this apart. So if that happens, just take a socket or anything smooth and strike this retainer on top, and that'll usually draw that loose enough that the next time you go to compress it, it works. So we're going to go ahead and squeeze this one. See, that's the kind of noise you're going to experience when you do that. If they're really stuck, I've heard that really sound loud. And again, if you're doing that on the car, you might want to strike each of your valve with a socket first and an extension just to get them all loosened up before you even start. But this one hasn't had a lot of miles, if any, on it really. And so they're not too tight. And since we're touching both sides of the valve like this, you can't really have that get stuck like that. But if you're just pushing from the top and relying on cylinder air pressure to keep that up, you could just start opening the valve and you'll hear it. So it won't catastrophically fall open. But if you start pushing on it, you'll hear a rush of air. And so that's the time to back it back off and strike it again. And then, don't, I hate to have to say this, but, don't beat it like it's going to, get damaged in the process. You just need to tap on it pretty good. And that will usually free it up. You can also tap on the valve tip a little bit. Make sure you're using something soft. Like this is just a brass punch we picked up somewhere. We use this on a lot of transmission parts and things, and this protects steel from getting damaged. So, really taking it apart is easier than putting it back together like a lot of things. But you can see here, this is starting to compress the spring. This is a dual valve spring setup, which is pretty heavy, but I still find it pretty easy to compress. But the single springs particularly are extremely easy to compress. You see we just lost the keeper down that valve lash adjuster hole. That's okay. And grab it. It's where you almost got to have a magnet to do this. So just get you a pen magnet at the auto parts store, a couple dollars. Now we got both of these. Now you can see the taper and the rounded lock on there. That's the style that these engines use. Most of these are exactly the same dimensions. BC does make ones that are a little bit stronger billet than the OEM ones, but it's not a part that really gets tore up too bad because our cams just generally aren't that radical. But if you do need that, we can do that for you. So now you see the springs compressed. There's really no use in compressing it further. All that's going to do is put more stress on everything you're trying to do and kind of encourage your valve to get cocked in there and bent, you know, that type of thing. So we're going to go ahead and start backing it off now. And this has a quick release. So you can do that, or you can, you know, just start threading this out too. That works. So here's your retainer. These are titanium, as I mentioned. You take these out, you want to look for wear here, particularly on titanium. Actually, this will wear out faster than a steel one. Usually the steel ones will last forever, but this is lighter, and so you're going to get a little more RPM out of the equivalent valve spring setup. So we got our dual spring here. Most of the time you're not going to see the center spring, but it really doesn't matter in this application. Luckily, the clearances are not so tight that you have to run oddball valve stem seals. GSC does make some smaller ones if you do have a spring that's super tight, but these seem to fit just fine. We'll go ahead and grab one of our exhaust ones here just to confirm that theory here. You can see here, there's really quite a bit of room. If you ever ran like a triple spring, I don't think anybody does on the 6G72 that I've heard of, you might really have to watch that clearance there. So I'm just going to put this in a little motor oil. We're using Redline 1550 today, no big deal. Since this is off the car, we might as well take that valve out and lubricate it. And you can pull this seal off, but if the valve's in there, you just got to be extra careful not to scar up your valve here. You're going to have leakage as it tears up the seal. So these should just push in. See here, got that out. This has got some miles on it, obviously. I'm not really concerned about the carbon too much. We got most of that off the head. And you can see here, there's no wear at all, really. It's like brand new. So I think these are Ferrera valves. They're oversized, nice valves. So now, set that somewhere safe. Keep track of your keepers and your other valve components. These things just like to go everywhere. And you cannot find one in the middle of the night, trust me. So now, there's no valve in there. We have the seal. What I like to do, they do make specialty tools for this, but really a pair of needle nose pliers works as good as anything. Just grip this and just sort of wiggle that and twist and pull, and it'll come right off. You want to not clamp too far down here because then you're literally clamping it to the head tighter and tighter, and so that's going to be obviously an issue if you're trying to take it off. You can see here, these are all green. So I have suspicions that these are kind of inferior seals anyway. So again, it goes back to knowing what you have. You know, that's kind of why I assume any used engine components are going to need looking over at least. Just make sure they're good. You want to make sure that this is, I know it's kind of dark in here, but that is free of the old seal. So sometimes a little bit of the seal will stick to there and that could cause some issues. These also have these spring retainer or locators. These ones that go up inside the spring, which are really nice because they'll keep your spring from bouncing around. The OEM ones are more of a flat setup, and that's fine. Either way, you just want to make sure those are in there, because if you put this back together in there, your installed height's going to be incorrect, and you're also going to pound out the head there, and so it's neither one of those things you really want. So we're going to grab our new stem seal. Sounds like the postman's here. Hopefully that's some parts for some people. So kind of put that on there. And what I like to do next is, seems like the best fit is just an ordinary 11mm socket. Hey, thanks.
How are you?
We're doing good.
Got anything going out?
Not right now.
All right.
Actually, is that one ready, Hunter?
This one?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, I guess so.
All right.
Thanks a lot.
Thanks.
Friendly male person. So we're going to knock this on. And basically, Shouldn't take a ton of force, but just kind of make sure that's on there all the way around. You can kind of hear the tone change a lot or feel it. And you can also kind of just go down in there and make sure it makes sense. Because if it's crooked, you know, you're going to have problems with it not, you know, being concentric to the valve. It's not going to seal. And the other thing is you don't want to beat it on so hard that you start cutting through this, because then it could fail as well. So the next piece, take our valve, put a little motor oil, and I'm sure if you have assembly lubricant, that'll work just fine too. Just kind of anything designed to work in the engine component, because you don't just want to use any random grease that we don't know the chemical composition of. It may damage these valve stem seals, and you know, that's kind of the whole point is replacing them, is that they'll last a long time. So we just kind of from the back, we'll stick it up in the valve guide, move it up and down a few times here, and then once it gets to the seal, I just sort of twist it and push gently. It goes to the keeper groove, and then rest of the way. And then you can kind of go in and out a little bit, get everything lubricated real nice. And this will also kind of tell you if that seal's concentric, because if that was like cocked one way or the other, you could really see it at this point. In fact, I'm a little worried that here at 11 o'clock it's sticking a little hot, so I'm going to tap on that just a little bit. Yeah, I think that's better. So that's all the way on. Okay, so now we make sure that our locator's here. We take our spring, make sure that's fitting nice in there. Here's kind of the tricky part. Let's keeping these keepers from flying out. So what I like to do is put these in first, and you can put some grease on these. It'd probably help keep them there, but particularly when you're working on the bench like this, it's not too bad. Now we hold the valve with our finger on the other side, and then line that up, and then shove it down. And Snap-on and Blue Point and a few other places make tools to kind of just whack this in. I've never been real comfortable with those, and I'm sure if you're doing a lot of cylinder heads, you might like them. But I would rather just compress this again and push that in. So we take our compressor rig. This is a little bit loose from where we were before. And then we line this up with the valve again. And we start squeezing. I'm just making sure I'm straight on with the valve on the back side here. And this is not locked, so let's lock that. You can adjust them on this side too. Oh, coming out. And I'm not going to edit that out because that is kind of typical. Especially if you're doing it in the car, you're going to see that. That's why I kind of caution you putting these in, just to be really careful. Keep a magnet around. If you want, you can actually drape shop towels or something over the rest of your engine in case they pop out like that. You're going to catch it easily. Got that back in. So I think I had this too tight to lock that without squeezing it too much. Still too tight. Okay, so that's there, and we're straight on the valve on the back side. I'm going to move this past the workbench so I can rotate the adjustment. And now it's going to be really helpful to kind of roll this head over and just being cognizant not to scratch up your deck surface. I'm not touching the deck anywhere. You're going to notice this thing is going to want to get out of whack all the time, so you want to go like that. See, it's critical to kind of shove straight down, not on one side. So we go a little bit at a time, just sort of push these in. And once you kind of get further down, it keeps getting easier. You can see these keepers are both in there and in the groove. This one's a little low, but as we release this, it should start to come back and tighten up. Next, take our quick release. Get that out of the way. Don't hit the back of the deck. Okay, so now this looks in. Looks good. But the last thing you want to do is take your soft punch. Give that a few strikes. You can see here, if we use steel, that could mess up that stem. So this brass won't, unless you really get crazy with it. The point of that was to make sure this keeper's fully seated. If you whack that and it flies out, you saved yourself a lot of trouble, because you try running the engine like that and you're going to have a lot worse problems. So that's something else to check while you're doing that. And we're just marking the ones we did. I did this one before the video here. That way you know, because there's a lot, and you hate to take one back apart. You already did. That's pretty annoying. So we now have 2 out of 12 of these changed, and the process is exactly the same for pretty much all of them. Kind of from back here, you can see you're trying to push on the valve. So, and not hit the combustion chamber or the deck surface anywhere, because this is really sensitive aluminum. And, kind of the smallest of gouges in here will cause a head gasket leak. And, yeah, that's really the process. If you need some Velcro valve stem seals, we do keep them in stock if you can't find them somewhere, but a lot of times you can just go down to AutoZone and do them. These cars have enough specialty parts as it is. We try to use as much off-the-shelf stuff as we can, just because if you're out in the middle of nowhere or on a race week or something like that, you can't wait 3 days for valve stem seals to show up. So that's kind of why we kind of lean towards Velcro a lot rather than OEM on some things where we find the quality is the same, just for that exact reason. Today was educational, and put some comments below. Anything you think we're doing that takes more time or not the best. This is just how we've always done it. It's probably not the only way, but just let us know anytime if there's any way we can get some revenge on your ride.